Welcome home to St. Anne's. We want you to know that you're welcome to join us at 10 a.m. on Sundays. Please be sure to hit subscribe to receive our sermons. We can't wait to meet you. Well, that's a fun gospel, and let's see what we can do with it today, shall we? So just a brief recap, because Easter for us was a couple weeks ago, but for them it's very very present and very real to them at this time. So we've been able to go back through time and pull all these different stories apart, but really you have to remember that all of this is happening at one time. So we've pulled apart some of the different stories for each of these different people, and we'll continue to do that. But it's important to remember that they're parallel stories. They're all happening at the same time. These are not this happened and then this happened and then this happened. This is all together. So for these folks that we're talking about, they're still very very fresh and very new, and they're not sure what to do with it. And I want us to examine that because I think it's really important for us to examine how we are in our own grief, trauma, sense of overwhelmed, especially now. I think all of us are managing and handling things very differently, and it changes from moment to moment, obviously, but at some point, if it hasn't happened to you already, at some point, you are going to be washed over by this flood of emotions and just complete loss of control. And there's no sense of meaning. It's just exhaustion, fatigue, sadness, grief, complete unknowing what to do. Like you don't even know what feelings to feel anymore. Does that make sense? And luckily for me, you can only chat back, and I won't see the chat until later, so I don't know if you ever feel that way or not, but I know I do. I know for me, I feel lots of different feelings. Sometimes I'm very excited and joyful because for me right now, I can really focus on being a priest and focus on my spirituality. And at times I feel complete and utter grief because I'm used to being physically with everybody, and that's hard for me. I'm a physical person. I also am thankful for this time with my kids. I'm also completely distraught for all this time that I have with my kids. So does it make sense that we have all of these different emotions? And sometimes we're going to feel guilty for the emotions that we're feeling, which adds another feeling onto it. Or you're going to feel confused about the feelings you're feeling. So realize that we are walking our own road to Emmaus. And that's okay. And in these moments, these disciples are feeling all these different feelings. And that's okay. Every single one of those feelings is okay and important. And it's important to take a deep breath, to be able to examine those different feelings, to name them and acknowledge them, and then to figure out where we go from that. Because it's not until they really dive into their story and really examine it and find the meaning in it that they're able to see Christ in the midst of them. That's kind of what happens here. So they're walking along and they're so entrenched in their sadness and their trauma, they're just rehashing the story. And I know even to this day, my father passed away in December, but I think sometimes you go through rehashing the technical details. And there's something healing in that, but there's no meaning to be found in that. So there's a separation, and it's an important part of grief and meaning making, but we rehash the details. And that's what these folks are doing. They're just walking along, rehashing all the details. Well, when I first found out, it looked like this. And then, do you remember when this happened? Oh my gosh. So they're rehashing details. And Jesus shows up, but they don't realize. So some strange weirdo shows up, and he doesn't know any of the details. Idiot. And so they proceed to tell him the story. And he points out to them, yeah, but you don't get it. So you can tell me the details, you can tell me the technicalities of it, but you don't even understand what you're talking about. And they're like, yeah, no, we don't. And so he proceeds to help them to find meaning in that, to put their experience in the context of scripture and tradition and all their experiences and all these different things. And then suddenly it starts to make a little bit more sense to them. They still don't realize that it's Jesus, though. They don't do that until what? And this is really, really important, because you're going to notice these stories all have this piece of physicality to them. So it starts to make more sense to them, and they start to understand their role in the story more. But it's not until they're gathered at the table, eating together. Christ breaks bread and eats with them, and then they realize it's him. This is such an important story for us. It's so, so very important. Because you and I get wrapped up in technical details. Because here's the thing. We can manage technical details. We can talk about them. We can name them. We can do something about them. It's harder when we try to make meaning out of them. When we try to get a sense of our role and our place in this big scheme of things. That's harder. It's easier to say, what if we injected Clorox bleach into people's veins? Maybe that would kill viruses. Yeah, it won't. It will kill your cells. Don't do that. That's bad. But we look for what? When trauma happens, we look for answers. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to stream our churches online. Oh, but wait, no, we won't let you have communion because that'd be weird. Oh, no, we're going to figure this out. We're going to do this. I'm going to make masks. I'm going to do this. And all those things are very, very important, except don't inject anything into your system unless a medical doctor does it. Don't. It's bad. It's important to do those things. It's important to examine those technical details in those stories. But then we need to take the next step. We've got to be willing to find meaning and to look deeply into those things and to find Christ in them and to find our role and our place in them, to find the wonder and the meaning and the joy and the sanctity and all these different things. And I want us to think about that because it's there. It's there, but we are so focused on the details, on the getting through, on the managing, on doing something about it that sometimes we forget. And I know many of you have had experience with a 2-year-old. But we all do kind of the same thing. But when you're in trauma, when you're overwhelmed, I'm going to do a little bit of brain stuff here with you today because I think it's important. And it's somehow safer to talk about it in the disciples and in 2-year-olds than in ourselves. So maybe if I give us some distance and I talk about those disciples and those 2-year-olds, it won't feel quite so offensive. We'll see. Okay, so here's how the brain works. You got these different parts of your brain, right? And this prefrontal, this front part, right? That's what we call your wizard. That's the thing that makes good choices. That you can think about things, you can make good choices, you can learn, you can do all the things, right? And then back here, we got this fun little thing we call the lizard brain. These are the Meg terms. These are not technical, by the way. So don't go to your neurologist and be like, my priest explained the brain to me. Don't do that. Don't do that. Okay, but back here we got this wizard, or lizard. And that's the first part of your brain that evolves. And the part of that brain really is about you surviving, right? You getting from this moment to the next moment. You breathing and you not being eaten by a bear. That's all we're looking for here, right? And so when this lizard fires, it floods your body with hormones and things like that. And it takes over this part because here's the tricky thing. The two don't fire at the same time. So if this guy is firing, this guy shuts down. You aren't making good choices. Have you ever noticed with a 2-year-old or your teenager or your spouse that you're like full on mad, right? And you're like yelling at them and stuff and like they ain't got nothing. And like, do you remember when I told you blah, 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 blah? And you like let on the best lecture. Oh my gosh, you were so proud because you put all the most fantastic pieces together. And they didn't catch a single word. I mean, it feels good to lecture, doesn't it? But it means nothing. Because guess what? This part ain't working. So, here's the deal. Until this part calms down, this part doesn't work. Until these disciples walk this road, they're walking, they're processing. Their lizard is slowly calming down. They're with Jesus. They're with this stranger who can start to make more meaning. They slowly move from lizard to wizard. They can slowly start to process some of these things. And it's not until then that they can really do the work that they need to do. It is not until they get back to their wizard that they're capable of making sense of this, of getting out of locked rooms and building a church that you and I inherit. And luckily for us, we also inherited their brains. So we do the same darn thing. So there are times that we're going through when you're going to be pure lizard. And here's the deal. That's okay. Because that's important. That's what helps us survive. That's not a bad thing. There is no part of this that is a bad thing. That is wrong. Now, if you're in your lizard and you start like beating up the neighbors and setting fire to stuff, then we got a problem. Don't do that. But it's okay to be in that place because that is your brain trying to get through this. And guys, we're going to get through it. It will happen. Take a deep breath because here's the trick. There is an answer. There is an answer to how to calm down that lizard. You take a deep breath. You get that breath going again. You find your calm. You find your center. You pray. You find Christ. Get back into your wizard, and we're back in the game. And we will get through this. We will. But know that there's going to be some lizard time. There is nothing wrong with that time. We need to walk the road to Emmaus. We've got to walk it. Because it's in that finding that technical stuff, walking through that technical stuff, that we can start to examine a little bit more, that we can start to make a little bit more meaning out of it. And I promise you with every piece of my soul, if we walk this road to Emmaus, we will find Christ's resurrection in the broken bread. We want you to know that you're welcome to join us at 10 a.m. on Sundays. Please be sure to hit subscribe to receive our sermons. We can't wait to meet you.